Hi, and thanks for joining us on the Alpha House. This is a new series where we speak to Pan-Africanists and people who are basically passionate about Africa and the continent at large. Today we speak to Honorable Kojo Yankah, who's very prominent in Ghana and a person who's very passionate about Africa and its development. Do join us. So let's start off with just understanding in your own, from where you stand, what do you view as Pan-Africanism and why is it important?
Pan-Africanism is simpler than most people think. Pan-Africanism is the feeling of belonging to Africa and working like an African. It is important for Africans to know themselves, to unite their ideas, get together, learn about themselves, and feel as one, because Africa was one. And we were broken apart. So our coming together to feel like a family, either through the cultural path, through the academic path, through political, channels, they are all channels of getting to Pan-Africanism. So in effect, it's a question of all of us feeding together as Africans, or people of African descent, and sharing the same heritage and working together.
So Pan-Africanism is about heritage, which means it's an old idea technically, because heritage means we are celebrating things that have been in existence. So as Kwame Nkrumah would have said, we were working towards being Pan-Africanists as a continent. Does it mean we're going back to the old? And if we're going back to the old, then what is the new that we are building and the future?
Right. Kwame Nkrumah worked with the ideas from others who had started before. Marcus Garvey, W.B. Du Bois, all those who had started much earlier from 1900, wanting to unite our efforts, and they came quite a long way. So if you look at the Pan-Africanist congresses that were started in 1900 by people of African descent, mainly from the Caribbean, the United States, coming to London, coming to Brussels, coming to various parts of Europe, to hold meetings with Africans, trying to bring them together. It is that movement that helped a lot of African countries to get liberated, including Kenya, of course. So the whole sentiment and the feeling of being African towards one another, to liberate each other, to help each other economically, to get us out of underdevelopment, to help us to feel that we are culturally one people, because we were separated. I do not think that there's anybody who will deny the fact that we were united and we were separated by Europeans who thought that there was so much in Africa to belong to them. So we got separated. It's unfortunate that it has come this way, and that's why Kwame Nkrumah, when he led Ghana to independence, invited people of African descent to come to Ghana to help in bringing all the other African countries together. So it is a movement to get us all to now come back to our own. Because, listen, when we were separated, what happened? We lost our identities, we lost our rich culture, we lost our history. Educational system virtually destroyed everything, and our minds, were colonized, and we became like them, those colonial invaders.
So why is it important to work towards Pan-Africanism, especially in 2024?
Oh, it is even more important. Now, here we are. Everybody looks at the map of Africa. Everybody looks at the resources Africa has. And then you ask yourself, why is Africa poor? There is a reason. Why is Africa poor? All our resources. And let me even chip in here to say that our educational system does not even teach us the resources we have, right? We do not know about them. South Africa, how many South Africans have really studied gold in school, except as a commodity? We studied cocoa as a commodity. We have a number of mineral resources that are coming out each day. Everybody is talking about lithium. How many Africans know what lithium is? So we were denied the right to know what we are, what we were. We had a lot of heroes. We had a lot of trading going on the continent. They just cut us off from our own history, and we learned other people's history. So it's important for us to get together as one people. All these divisions that come through one border here, one border there, Africans fighting among themselves, they're all totally unnecessary. They are all, being perpetuated because we do not know the importance of us getting together. My studies show me that anywhere there is a civil war, look for some resources. People are fighting over resources. So it's important for us, all Africans and people of African descent, to know what our history is, who are we, what were our achievements, and why it is important to get together and stop these unnecessary wars and conflicts that go on between families and ethnic groups on one side, on the other, who speak the same language and yet keep fighting on the continent. It's a useless effort.
You brought up the issue of conflict in Africa, and of course we have so many countries that are at war, so to say, currently, starting with our very close neighbors. That's there's Sudan, there's Congo. So in your opinion at this point, and the causes for this war, who is behind this war and who's benefiting, and why are we allowing it as Africans to keep on, that we still have war that is being perpetuated by I don't know who?
Right. Let me say that we did not divide ourselves. There were European countries who considered Africa as their private property, and therefore decided to do anything they wanted with the people. They created conflicts. Go to Namibia, tribal conflicts on the border with Angola. Go to South Africa. People do not even know that people in Zimbabwe and Zambia, most of them speak the same languages, and you are in the middle of it, what we call the Great Lakes region. And people are thinking they are different because we have been made to think that we are different. So what happens? We now have to start fighting over territory. Who has ownership of these resources? We have allowed the fighting to go on when foreign interests are exploiting the resources we have. And in the course of exploiting the resources, we disagree with each other, and then they supply us with arms. Who has the weapons? Africans don't own weapons. So they supply the weapons, we take them, fight and kill each other while the resources go out.
So you've spoken about weapons, and these I just want to know at this point, who would you say then owns the African continent? Is it us people? Or who are the proxies that you're talking about that are funding these wars?
I think the former colonial invaders are still behind all the wars and conflicts because they encourage them. It is in their interest to encourage them so that we can continue fighting while they drill the oil, they take out the mineral resources and enrich their countries. So it is so clear that, I mean, one doesn't need to go very far to know who is behind them. Look at what happened in Liberia. Same people. All that happened was that one group was made to feel that you are being, you are being left out of development. So take arms and fight for your rights. And now you bring in 14-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, and we lost so many people unnecessarily. Same thing is happening in Central Africa, in East Africa, and even in some parts of Southern Africa. So until we feel that, hey, wait a minute, your African neighbor is not your enemy. Why should Congo, Rwanda be fighting over resources? Just a misunderstanding. And look at what happened in Rwanda itself. So we did not take charge of our own education to learn about each other. I'm in Ghana. Nigeria is next door or 2 doors away. I didn't study Nigeria. I didn't study Kenya. I didn't study South Africa. I studied British history and European history. So until I got very much aware and awakened, those are the countries that I knew. So if I had learned about Kenya, if I had learned about South Africa, I had learned about Rwanda, I had learned about Congo, I would understand. So for me, that is part of the problem. So we were separated and we have not taken the time and trouble to learn and relearn what Africa was before we were separated.
So at this point, does this mean that now Pan-Africanism is us fighting these forces again?
Pan-Africanism is a movement to know about each other. It's a movement to learn about each other. It is a movement to unite ourselves rather than think about conflict and power and little, differences here and there. Until we do, we have a certain sense that it's only unity that can help us to restore peace and sanity in our countries. We would be wasting our time. So Pan-Africanism is asking for us to change our mindsets, start introducing ways of knowing about ourselves, because we have a rich history. We have a history of, proud people, and know that we can put self-confidence back in ourselves. Otherwise, we'll
the system you're talking about on reworking on our education and ways of learning, what are these methods that you as a Pan-Africanist would highlight?
Oh, I will go straight into the curriculum. What do we learn from class 1, from kindergarten? We should learn about Africa. I want a curriculum from school that will show people a map of Africa and tell them this is Kenya, this is Morocco, this is South Africa, this is what they do. They all are part of the continent of Africa. Teach us the resources we have in Africa. You see, I live in Ghana. a lot of academics, a lot of, people who have gone through school. But ask, if you pour a bowl of silver onto this table, how many can identify it as silver? No, because we were not taught. Cocoa, which is our mainstay before all these rich mineral resources started coming up. Most people in Ghana have not seen a cocoa tree, right? So when we say that we are exporting cocoa, what is cocoa? Again, it goes into the curriculum. I'm always interested in curriculum. What are we teaching ourselves? If you put a map of Africa on my wall and ask an average Ghanaian student, point to Kenya, you'll have a difficulty, right? Because even our geography, we didn't learn about ourselves. So it's a long way to go, but it's important that people like Kwame Nkrumah started. But look at people who also started to unite Africa, and what happened to them. Kwame Nkrumah was chased out. Now it is no secret that the CIA, intervened and helped some Ghanaian soldiers to overthrow Kwame Nkrumah. Look at what they did with Gaddafi in his attempt to unite Africa. It is no secret anymore that anytime we move to unite the continent, you have a problem. 1963, I was alive when the OAU was born, Organization of African Unity. Even then, it was not easy, because some of the leaders were being pulled away from those conferences. Oh, don't be part of these things. Oh, Kwame Nkrumah wants to be the leader of Africa. Oh, Nyerere wants to do this and that. So even some people, some leaders like Nyerere at the time, who were very much, interested in Umoja and unity and all that, were suspicious of Kwame Nkrumah. It was much later that Nyerere came to Ghana and confessed that, some of us did not understand Kwame Nkrumah. How can you one day wake up and say that the whole of the continent has one leader? But it would have been possible. Why not?
Yeah, it would have been possible at that point, because we had Kwame, who was very promising. And
Yes.
Unfortunately, we missed out because of selfish reasons back then. So currently, in this day and age, who would you say would lead Africa then to this new Pan-Africanism?
I now with reference to history and from what we have learned, I think that movements should wake up in the various parts of the continent. We should not rely only on the leaders. Movements should start. The awakening. See, when we're talking about Kwame Nkrumah now, we are saying that most people did not even understand what he meant. It means that the people on the ground were not ready for it. It shows quite clearly. So now it should be movements of Africans, the ordinary people. They should understand what Pan-Africanism means and the benefits we would have if we were all united. When you get them to understand, a leader emerges and everybody follows. Those days, we didn't. We were busy, and most of the leaders were busy with their own internal affairs. Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta had his own problems with the movement. How do you call your Mau and all kinds of, not only in Kenya, almost all parts of Africa. There were internal. So I'm saying that if we now get the awakening very well, and people on the ground understand, now listen, why have we been fighting? We've been fooled. We've been made to think that we are different from the other tribe. We've been made to think that, oh, that tribe is ambitious. We've been made to think we are all Africans. Once we get to understand that we are all Africans, let's work together. Let's unite our efforts. There's no point in going into tribes and so on. Yeah, every country in the world had tribes, ethnic groups. But when you want to build a nation, you bring all of them together around one objective. The objective is let's unite, know what we have, let's exploit the resources ourselves and build a better country for our own people.
I still feel any sort of leadership needs, any sort of movement needs a leadership that guides the rest of the people on board. Because Africa is a big continent with 55 countries. We can't just say that everyone will start on the ground and move. There has to be some sort of leadership. In your opinion, would you have like a list of maybe 2 or 3 people that you feel would move? Would maybe PLO Lumumba be part of it? Would Julius Malema be part of it? Who are these people you feel would lead?
So I have told you that if movements go on around the continent, the movements themselves will have their leaders, right? When the leaders now unite their forces, that is where you are getting there. In the past, only one leader of one country wanted to do it. We know from history, it didn't work. Now, my thinking is that let leaders emerge from all parts of the continent. When those leaders meet, it will be like the Pan-Africanist conference that was held in 1945. So it's important for movements to grow. You mentioned Malema. You can't say Malema should be the leader of that kind of African unity. He should be one of them. PLO is one of them. Arikana is one of them. Let's build up the movements. Now, look at the French-speaking countries. The leaders, Sankara was one, he was overthrown. There are new ones that have come in. So until you get a groundswell of people who understand and agree, in that case, eliminating one will not kill the movement. See what I mean? You need, if you have about 20 leaders you can identify on the continent, holding their meetings with the masses behind them, you see the difference. So as for the regular elected leaders, yeah, they will get the kind of sentiments of the people on the ground and work with those sentiments. But they will do it only when they realize they are not alone.
Yeah, so we have to work together. That's what you're trying to say, in short.
Absolutely.
And on this working together, West Africa, we've seen a lot of coups that have been happening. We've seen Burkina Faso, we've seen Mali, Niger, and the list keeps on growing. What's your take on that? And also these young people, the leaders leading those movements, part of the Pan-Africanism, is it geared towards that?
I will say yes. And see, they are all benefits of what some of these leaders like PLO, Arikana, and others have been saying. We have been independent for so long. Here we are, our ties with our colonial invaders have not changed. So we signed some agreements to tie us to them. All our resources are kept in somebody's country. And when you need some of the resources, they say, write an application. And then you go out there and they say, oh, your country is poor. And particularly with the French-speaking countries. I mean, they have been independent for how long? Their leader, starting from original Patrice Lumumba, who wanted freedom for his people, look at the way he was butchered. Now, they did that to put fear into all those countries so that leaders will be assimilated to the French system. They will not complain. So suddenly, the youth that you see on the streets complaining about French imperialism, some of the youth happen to be in the armed forces, and that's what is happening. So it's an awakening. It's an awakening that we cannot continue with that. And mind you, people may have all the differences, all the opinions about somebody like Kagame, but he took the bull by the horn. It was not easy, and it has not been easy. But I know Rwanda. I have visited, and I've seen the kind of change that has come over. Some people will ask you, "Oh, don't you think he's a dictator?" Who created a dictator? Who created a dictator? It's the people who create their own dictators because they have seen what he's doing, what he's leading them to do. I'm not going to tell Rwandans what to do. I have seen developments going on. Similarly, when I go to South Africa, I regret to see xenophobia, for example. Why xenophobia? There are people who lived across the border, were living in South Africa, working in the mines from neighboring countries. Now they are foreigners. You had Ghana, Nigeria. I taught a number of journalists from South Africa during the liberation days in the Ghana Institute of Journalism. So when you go there, you know that a number of them got their education outside of South Africa during the liberation movement. And it all helped when we say, hey, let's all go on the streets for Mandela. We all knew what it was. Now, because of lack of education, some of them think the Africans outside of South Africa are taking their jobs and so on. It's basic misunderstanding. I think that their history, that's why I'm talking about learning about your history. You learn your history and you are taught that, oh, when Ghana got independence, Ghana invited all the other countries, spent a lot of resources on those countries to help them to gain their freedom. Ghana contributed to the liberation of South Africa. If that history had gone round, what is going on now would not be there. But nobody is teaching our history.
The teaching of is a concern. I say the teaching of history is a concern, and I sort of agree with you on certain aspects. However, I would want to know, is Pan-Africanism still a big deal in Ghana today? Is it popular? Is it not? Is it something that Ghanaians feel would work for the continent?
If you mention Kwame Nkrumah's name, let me tell you a story. When Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown, a bill was passed in Parliament overnight that nobody should possess a picture or any book written by Kwame Nkrumah or anything. So the following day, the whole country, from Accra to all the districts, were asked to burn our books, all pictures, any effigy of Kwame Nkrumah. So we burnt everything, right? Now, the youth are demanding to read about Kwame Nkrumah. So now, we've got into a situation where the government itself has now renovated the Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum. It's something that will go on all over the continent, depending on who is holding whose tail. If you come to power and you give up your country for another country to dictate to you, you don't have control, and therefore you think that all those who have passed made mistakes and that you are the first leader on the earth, you are doing injustice to your people. So I'm saying, let's teach ourselves. I want to know more about Kenya. I want to know more about Sudan. You only read in the newspapers or watch on television, Sudan is burning, Somalia is burning, this country is, you don't even know the background. You understand? So I want to know more. And that is what I'm engaged in teaching, that we should learn more about each other.
And as we learn more, you mentioned about Rwandan President Paul Kagame. And I don't know if you said he's a dictator or not, or what's your take on his style of leadership? And is it something that Africa can adopt as a whole?
I am not one to prescribe one type of leadership for the continent. Every country has its own history. Rwandans are in a unique, different position. Yes and no to your question, because they went through a very terrible time, losing so many people, and therefore getting somebody to say, let's stop the nonsense. Let's all call ourselves Rwandese. Let the people determine what style of leadership is good for them. As long as the leadership is fighting for control of the people's own culture, their resources, using the resources of the country to develop the country, to, just let underdevelopment disappear. Let's chase poverty out. Let's get every African child out of the mindset that they have, that we only have to rely on some other people before we can exist. No. So I like his style of leadership. I will not say that every country should go that way. There are several ways of getting your people to feel we are together. And I'm saying every African leader should make all the efforts to unite his people, because it is this tribal, ethnic background and so on and so forth people exploit to divide us, while our resources are being taken away. We probably do not even know how our resources go out, right? I'm in Ghana. We had cocoa. We have gold. We have bauxite. Now, they say we have lithium. And I'm crying here. And I'm saying, if the chiefs in that community know lithium, let them come and tell me.
And before they come, let me ask, you have a background in media, journalism, and of course you trained a lot of other media students on that. What is the role that media plays in terms of promoting Pan-Africanism and a change of what you're saying, sharing of knowledge and history?
It's good I hear you. Your background is media. My background is media as well. What we have gone wrong, and I say this out of my own experience, because I didn't only practice. I set up the African University College of Communications. We have not emphasized on Africana studies. So in my university, we have a Center for Africana Studies that is helping the students, before you come out of the university, you must have a full breadth of Pan-Africanism. It is not the same in Kenya. I spent 3 months in fellowship at the University of Nairobi, myself as a student. Of course, this was a postgraduate course. But I'm saying we should have that sense of Pan-Africanism in all media institutions. And I have set an example. Because you can go through, the normal courses in journalism, reporting, writing, editing, and all that. And if you don't ask questions, you you realize that you are just learning the same thing that somebody sitting in Britain or in America is learning. So it is important that the sense of being African is studied in all schools, particularly media institutions. Because most journalists know next to nothing about, except their own country.
And as you speak about the knowledge of other places, just to clarify, does it mean that Africa is still under colonial powers?
Oh, yeah. We are still neocolonial. What Kwame Nkrumah said. We only have flag independence, but we are not self-reliant. We are not in charge of our own countries. And look at all the systems. I only mentioned education. Look at the educational system. Hasn't changed. Everybody wants to be trained like, some foreign, and speak English like a foreign something. I studied Swahili because I wanted to know more, right? Most of the things we have learned, we studied in English. And I was challenging some of our, intellectuals here. The kind of things that we say as journalists, if journalists were to say them in local language, we would be doing a lot of good. But here, of course, you have gone ahead. Kiswahili, no matter what anybody says about Kiswahili, for me, it's one of the best things that ever happened. You can learn English in addition to Kiswahili, fine.
I agree on the Swahili part. Look, every African needs to learn that, perhaps.
No, I agree entirely. So if we do not, I was talking about education, but let's also go to culture. Sometimes we are even shy of our own culture. In Ghana, we have something we call Friday wear. Friday wear means wear African dress or Ghanaian dress on Fridays. I beg your pardon. Why should it be only on Fridays? Why can't we wear our uniform regularly to work on 5 days of the week or design for ourselves? Of course, I know the weather in Kenya, so you would want to wear something warm. But where is our culture? Sometimes even in the media, when you are reporting, culture comes last. Politics first. Then you go to some other distressing stories because bad. Then you go to something related to. So we have followed a certain pattern of presenting news, for example. So things that concern ordinary people come last, because we are taught that good news is bad news. True or false? Anyway, but I'm saying that we need to tackle all facets of our life.
And in the same, let me ask, sorry, I've cut you short on this. As you mentioned the facets that we need to tackle, who are these new colonialists then who are in charge of Africa or the different nations that we live in today that are causing this stifle of not developing or moving to the next step?
We have some of the leaders who are still hanging on to the apron strings of the colonial invaders and therefore cannot break away. And so they are leading the country with the policies that will suit other people. So once we have these leaders who have to look over their shoulder when they are drawing up a budget, when they have to announce any important milestone of the country, and they are still holding on to the colonial powers, we don't have independence.
I would have wanted for you to mention these masters that you feel are in control of Africa.
Oh, Western countries, without a doubt. Britain, France, even Belgium, that's in relative terms, is not a rich country. The United States of America, why is United States of America interested in whether in our cultural practices when it comes to LGBTQ and all that? It's our cultural practices that should dictate our life. So you don't come and threaten that if you pass this bill, we will not give you aid. My own thinking about aid is that if we did our homework well, we probably will not need aid because the resources are here. I remember one lecture where Gaddafi came to Ghana and said, listen, you have your gold, you have your cocoa. South Africa has all gold, all these resources on the continent. I have my oil. If we put them all together, we can create another World Bank. I mean, simple, but it makes a lot of sense. So until these leaders come to understand that we can do everything ourselves, we are not going anywhere. But again, that's where the awareness of the movement I'm talking to you about matters a lot. Until people have that kind of awareness to see through what their leaders are doing, will be standing at one point. But I'm confident that the kind of awareness going through various African countries, they are not for nothing. That South Africa has created a leader like Malema. You know, he's a creation of the frustration of the ordinary people. You may or may not like his style, but that's him. We will have those that sprang up in the French-speaking countries are just like the Malemas. They had a gun because they found out that ordinary people to take a long time. We heard about the Arab Spring. It happened from the ordinary people. Whether it helped them or not is another matter. But the point is that there will come a time in history where people will just wake up and say no one day. Whoever thought that Ghana would be independent in 1957? It's not all Ghanaians who wanted independence. Some said, hey, let the British stay, or let's take our time. Let's go gradually. You can get this all over the place. But the point is that history is not on the side of only one section of the people.
I agree with history. That's true. That I would want, you mentioned, you touched something around LGBTQ, and this is good to hear from a Pan-African perspective. What's your take? And why should it worry Africans, or as Africans, how do we go about it?
Have you, well, let me not ask you a question back, but in our communities, some of the communities, it's not that same-sex people are coming on television to say, oh, but we've had this for a long time. But they have not studied the LGBTQ. What do they all mean? If you go to the Q, it's queer. You want to bring some queer creations into a human society, You want our people to recognize that a man can marry a man in an African society. In Ghana, it is the communities which chase them out. In the local community, probably it's more popular in Accra, but in the local communities, the chiefs, the people chased out people that were found to be, homosexuals. It's not, I'm not saying that it should happen, but I'm saying the communities rejected them from the beginning when the idea started going around that, oh, now men and men can marry. Women and women can marry. It's, in our side, it's abomination. I'm telling you, it's not me. I'm saying it's culturally, an abomination. So before you go to all the, the medical and other conditions that people have to go through, now these days, some other human rights organizations are asking Ghanaians, do we know what those same-sex marriages are happening, what they are doing to a lot of Ghanaian youth. The youth came on one of the television stations the other day and confessed that he's gone through a lot of surgery, different types of surgery, for having allowed himself to be used. And he said, well, I did so because I needed money to go to school. Right? He said he didn't have money. The men who had an affair with him gave him money. It is an abomination. No matter how you want to justify it, it is culturally an abomination.
An abomination it is. That's what I've taken on that conversation. And as we come to the conclusion of our conversation, you're the founder of the Pan-African Heritage Museum also. I would want you to touch a bit on it and just tell us what to expect from that and why it's important.
Why it is important? Well, I said part of it already, but let me tell you something. Africa has a lot of missing pages. Missing pages of Africa because they were not written about. If you go through your history books and some of what we have learned over the past few years, you ask yourself, why weren't we taught this? Right? Why weren't we taught about ourselves? Why don't I understand what is going on there? And you realize that it was all deliberate. It's miseducation. When you talk about the continent itself, I have told you, few Africans know about somebody called Sheikh Anta Diop. Sheikh Anta Diop is a Senegalese, an academic, a scientist, who did all his research to find out the origin of civilization and origin of man. And all that we had learned in school about superiority of the white man completely vanished. I mean, point is, you learn about him, he goes all the way to Egypt, he does a lot of research. And there are some researches that also came out of Kenya, Nike, and others, which established clearly that world civilization began from Africa. But you and I didn't learn that in history. We learned about the Greek philosophers and those who gave the world civilization, and we quote them regularly. And then this man does all his research. It was only in 1974 that it was established in a UNESCO conference and his theses were accepted. Even then, most people in Africa do not even know about Sheikh Anta Diop and what he brought out. And then you come to find that Most of these Greek philosophers studied in Africa. If they studied in Africa, so they had the civilization. People who even knew about Jesus as black, all that they did was to paint him white, and we believed it. In my country, Ghana, in most of the communities, these days you don't hear it that much, but it was common to hear that if you are going to church and you meet a white man, go back home, you've seen God. That bad, that kind of mental slavery came right there. So much. So we were denied any knowledge about ourselves. And then when the slave trade came and the Africans were taken out of this continent, what did we write? We write the door of no return. So Africans were taken to South America, Caribbean, America itself, North America, and so on. Also got there, they were stripped of their names. They were cut off from their land. They were miseducated so badly. If you read Woodson Carter's book, The Miseducation of the Blacks, about Africa. Africa was painted dark and all that. So if we have so much rich history, why weren't we taught? And we have made the mistake of doing the same thing as I started saying. We are not teaching about ourselves. So that one apart, you also had people who also used the Bible. There's a Bible museum in Washington that I have visited that tells you clearly that there were several versions of the Bible. There was a slave Bible that preached to the slaves to become humble, to become... So the self-confidence of the African was taken away. Until Obama came to power, we didn't know that there were some women who helped NASA to put the first man on the moon. It was Obama's time that they honored those women and named the streets in front of NASA, after them. Why was that history missing?
Because
Africa,
probably we didn't have the Heritage Museum ready.
Thank you.
Where
So that is why this museum is important. I said the other day, there are so many museums in Africa. They are all in tiny bits telling about different things. So we need a place. Other people have their Mecca. Some Christians go to Israel every year, even though they don't understand what the Israelis are worshiping. We in Africa must have a place that we can go to for revival, for renaissance.
And that is what you're building for us in the museum.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
That
And
is what
as we conclude, you've mentioned the issue of Israel. And of course, it's inevitable to ignore the war between Israel and Palestine. Where should Pan-Africans stand in this war?
I do not think that Pan-Africanists should take any position. Social justice demands that you respect every human being. Social justice demands that you respect. That's why, elsewhere, we will talk about we were all created equal. Then what happened? So where should we stand? I think that our leaders sympathized with the Palestinians because it was their land. Even if the world created a state called Israel, Israelis should consider the Palestinians as human beings, people with rights, And justice demands that they respect their rights to be where they are. It is not, we cannot go and fight the war for Palestinians with them, but I know that the majority of our leaders are voting in the United Nations on behalf of the Palestinians. And that is the right place, in my opinion, to start.
Fantastic. And I think this is the right place where we have to end this conversation for today. Of course, this could go on and on and on because there's a lot to touch. But for this particular episode, then we have to end it there. I would just like you to give your conclusive remarks to people watching you and basically Africans and Pan-Africans and anyone who would want to be part of the movement.
This is the time for all Africans and people of African descent to be aware of the fact that we have missed a lot about ourselves, our identity, our culture, who we are. Our unity is important. Without unity, our self-confidence can never go up. Without knowing who our heroes and heroines are, we will not reach our level of self-confidence. Without changing the way we are educated, without knowing what we have and what we can do with those resources to build our own countries, we cannot go very far. Without uniting to create one nation, an African nation with one leader, with one foreign minister, with justice and everything organized along united lines, we will have it difficult. No African country can survive by itself. No. You are under threat if you think that it can survive on your own. It's not possible. So we should work hard to bridge the gaps that have been created amongst us and get united with each other. If we didn't understand why we are fighting our next neighbor, we should learn why. But most importantly, we should learn that in unity, we will survive better. We will build a better Africa, we'll give better contribution to humanity, and we will feel more free ourselves if we get united.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you and meeting you online and having such a great conversation. And I hope that this conversation keeps on going on and on and on. And I wish you the very best.
Thank you very much. And next time I make my way to Nairobi, I'll look for you as well.
Yes, please.
But
you're welcome.
I must say that you are also welcome anytime to Ghana. Winnie has my address, and I'll invite you to my house.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure.
Okay, bye.
Bye for now.